Hello and welcome to the Square Developer Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Moot, Head of Developer Relations here at Square. And today I'm joined by Binh Ly, who's a member of our developer community and is the owner and operator of the company Operate. Binh, thank you so much for joining us here. I'm so excited to chat more with you about what it is that you've built on the Square Developer Platform. You're also a hackathon winner. I'd love for you to just tell us all a little bit more about how you first got involved with Square and a little bit about your involvement on the hackathon.
First, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So Square's been on my radar since around the time of the company's founding, because I was working with a device that could handle credit card swipes. But I wasn't using that component of the device. But I was trying to think of a reason to use it, right? And then back then the thought was what stinks is when you go to a restaurant and you're with your friends, so why can't you split that check? So we're like, let's try and build something to do that. But back then, onboarding a merchant account was not that fun. So that lag time in making the sale and then getting the software activated for someone was too long. But we were fascinated that Square could do it in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So I was like, Square is pretty interesting. So I just followed the company's trajectory that whole time. And then I finally switched careers to say I changed the thing that I was working on from shipping software to messaging software around 2017. So that was the first version of Operator existed in a different company. And back then, the idea was that you should be able to message any company. But how do you do that without installing software at every business in the country? So we had this really insane approach where if you text it into the system, we would call the business and ask them the information and then text it back. But that was pretty neat that it worked that way, but ultimately wasn't scalable. But then once we realized that you could send text messages to the landlines, that changed everything, because a majority of businesses have landlines, and SMS is the most installed software on earth. So to get the customer, you didn't have the two-sided problem. The software was already on the phone. We just need to collect the text messages sent to the landline and present it to the business owner.
I mean, I always think that part is fascinating to me, because it's still, even after you submitted the hackathon thing, and every time I come back to it, I think this is something that most people just don't think is possible, of getting SMS on a landline. So I mean, I just, for those who are not familiar with this, how is this able to work, or to what degree could you sort of explain how this works to us?
Yes. So the way it was explained to me about how it works is that you can picture a gigantic phone book, and there's every phone number, every landline number is in there. And there's imagine two fields next to every phone number. One says data traffic and one says voice traffic. So when you get a cell phone, the voice traffic says whoever your carrier is, AT&T, Verizon, or whatever. And then the same for the data field. But for a landline, the data field is empty. So when you send a text message from your cell phone to a landline, it just goes to nowhere, because it doesn't know where to route it.
Yeah.
So by taking over provisioning the landline for voice traffic or data traffic, we're saying route that to the operator system.
I see. And so does this require any kind of physical component, or is this actually something that's it's done at the carrier level?
It's all at the carrier level.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So to actually utilize this capability, you just need authorization from the business that owns the landline. And so they just sign their name on a letter of authorization, and we submit that to the carriers. And then a few hours later, traffic starts flowing through. So that's one of the moments of delight for the customer, is they didn't realize this was happening. They signed up and they started getting traffic coming in. And they're like, I didn't tell anyone we can do this. So I'm like, it's already happening all day, every day. And now you're getting access to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, have so what you're saying there is have some businesses signed up for this, and suddenly, without even prompting it, people are getting text messages and didn't realize that people were texting them this whole time.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So that a lot of missed business happens this way. So we signed up a window tinting business without telling any of their customers. They're getting requests, right? Can I get a quote on this tint, right? If they didn't have the service, they would not know about that. that request.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing is that it's not replacing anything. You get the voice traffic still, and now you get the data traffic. And it's up to the business owner how they want to respond. They can call them back if they want that hyper personal touch, or just text back, which majority of the customers who interact with the platform prefer that. Just text, send a text, and off you go.
I mean, I'm guilty of that. I mean, like, I've been so stoked in the recent years that like more and more businesses are allowing sort of texting directly to these lines, because it's been able to like reschedule, like, I mean, getting my like car serviced at like this local car shop. It's so much easier that I get a little text message that says, hey, your car's ready, and you text back and be like, all right, great. Like, I'll be there by like 2. And I don't have to answer a phone call because, I'm in meetings all day. So I'm most of the time I just like let that go to voicemail, and then I hope that I can like text them back to say like, hey, I'll be there. So, it's so convenient.
Yeah, that voicemail aspect is also a really interesting component of the customer communication. We found that people don't leave voicemails.
Yeah.
So if someone calls, you miss the call, and then they don't leave a voicemail, it's really hard to have any context around that. So we invented this technique where if you call the landline, someone calls your landline, and if no one picks up, the system will text you back from that landline number. So it's not a spooky experience with a caller. Like if you called one number, but then you got a text back from another number saying, hey, I saw that you called, that's kind of a weird experience, right? So you probably ignore that too.
Yeah.
But if you call one number and you get text back from the same number, the response is pretty immediate.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's so validating, because it's like, the phone number for a lot of businesses, like this is kind of like a form of identity for them. And so like by keeping it all within that one thing, it feels very cohesive. It's, you can trust it. And, I've definitely had the spooky thing happen where like I call one place and then I get like a text back from another, and I'm like, I feel like this is like a weird phishing thing going on.
Yes.
And, you definitely don't want to have more of that.
Exactly. And a lot of businesses don't realize until you point it out to them that their phone number is part of their branding.
Yeah.
So if you drive by auto shops or something, you'll see the name of the business. And sometimes the phone number is just as large in the typeface as. So now you can maximize the utilization of that number.
Yeah.
Put a simple call or text this number in comes the traffic.
And so you have this technology of being able to do this SMS routing, and then you built an app for our Square Hackathon, and you won. Tell us a little bit about more what you built and like why you built it for the hackathon.
Yes. So the project that won the hackathon was not the project that I started with. The initial project was digital appointment cards. So if you book through Square Appointments today, you'll get an email, and in that email is a couple of links to add to your calendar, right? That's over email. But if you think about in real world scenarios at like medical practices, for example, or dental, you go in, you do your checkup or whatever at a dental office, and they say, see the front desk before you leave. So you go out there and they say they want to see you in 6 months. They put it into their system, and then they write down your information on a card and hand it to you. So it's on you to either remember that forever until the appointment or enter it into your own calendar. So I didn't know at the time that Square sent that email that lets you add to the calendar. So I thought, let's do that over SMS. But I built that, it was tied to Square Appointments, and it sent you a text where you can add it to your calendar. Then we saw that you could do that over email. It's like, oh no, this is the saddest thing, right? All this work. Then I vaguely recalled like an article I saw on your website about the number of no-shows and cancellations. Yeah. And it reminded me that it's like the missed call thing again. If you don't figure out how to like respond to that, you're going to lose it 100%. So we looked into could we hijack that process? Like if there's a no-show or a cancellation, can we help the business try and recover that? At least take a shot at it, right? 50-50 chance of getting that business. So that was like the genesis of that.
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, like we were very inspired by that because, it's being able to recoup like even half or a quarter of like those no-shows is like that could be the difference between making or breaking it in a given month or quarter for a business. And I think the other part that you had mentioned previously that, was also really impressive is like, say somebody has an appointment, they called in, they didn't leave a voicemail, maybe they wanted to reschedule. With Operator, like you can actually just like say, send a message back like, hey, what did you need help with? Or like, here's, maybe even like be smart and like look up like, oh, does this person have a booking? Were they trying to reschedule? Like there's so many different kind of workflows that kind of can spring from that touch point.
Yes. And I think the recent advent of LLMs has really helped in how that is experienced, because the Hackathon project, and this goes back to why people pick Operator over other messaging providers, I guess you'd say, is that in the Hackathon project, you can see that the cancellation campaign, when it sends out the sequence of text messages, you can customize all of those to use your own language. And the interesting thing is, what we've been experimenting with is using LLMs for, is like, it turns out it's kind of hard, and people also manage to mess up like reply Y to confirm or 1 to confirm. Like,
yeah,
and they can fat finger that easily. We see it a lot in the logs when we're helping the customers diagnose why some of the automations aren't happening. But you can feed that into the LLM, like, look at this conversation. Do you think they confirmed or not? And it turns out it's really good at that. That's one of my favorite uses of it so far.
Yeah. And so the other thing I wanted to sort of touch on is that, you have this product follow-ups that's a part of Operator, but this is actually kind of like grown beyond just like sending messages for, missed appointments. But like there's many other use cases. I was hoping that maybe you can like tell us like some of the other use cases that people have had for this communication style.
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, the customization of the messages is one of the big reasons people keep, contacting us. And that's not just over SMS. So one of the I guess the feedback that we get about built-in appointment reminders is that they're all the same. So we allow our customers to customize that initial message and the follow-up message, so it feels organic and on brand with how they do business.
Yeah.
But that didn't exist at the time of the Hackathon project. And the other thing is that this capability has found, when we first envisioned it, it was for like stylists, people we were most aware of who deal with cancellation and no-shows. But the general awareness of Square's APIs, the Square appointment product, Square payments, has really opened the door for Operator to kind of transition into like a consulting business. Like someone will say, I have this technical need or this problem, and then I can say, okay, I know how to solve that with some software and very specific integrations. So Operator is being white labeled essentially next year in an unexpected way with a company called Beam Readers, and they're a dental radiology company that will be using Operator's infrastructure to communicate with patients. They have this need where, like, currently they operate kind of like an Uber for dental radiology. Someone who needs a ride, and Uber matches you with a driver. So in the current business for Beam Readers, someone has a cone beam scan of their head. They need a radiologist to interpret it. So Beam Readers connects the two. So now there are a plethora of these cone beam devices across the country, underutilized. So they'll be launching a kind of like an Airbnb, but for the cone beam.
So for anybody who's like not familiar, give us like the quickest way to understand like what these cone beam readers are.
Yeah.
Like what they're used for.
So typically you go to the dentist and you get an x-ray done. That x-ray is in 2D, and dentists go to school and they're trained to interpret 2D. But the cone beam technology is 3D, and it captures like more of you, not just a chunk. So maybe like from the chest to the top of your head. So in that range of coverage, there could be diseases that the dentist is not trained to identify or address. But by law, they are liable for that. So if you go get a cone beam scan, there's some cancer somewhere in you, but the dentist doesn't tell you, they are liable for that.
Wow.
So Beam Readers exist to shift that liability. So you send the raw cone beam files to Beam Readers. They have radiologists on staff who will read through it and then write up a report, let you know that there's something wrong or if it's all good. So that's the core business around that that cone beam technology. And they're getting adopted in other industries too. So we're seeing it happen with chiropractors. So if you have a 3D view of someone's neck, that's really powerful and helpful.
No, I mean, like, as somebody, like, I have a pinched nerve in my neck, and I had to go in, like, get an MRI, get, like, steroid shots, and I'm sure that, like, somebody at least with a better analysis of, like, doing a 3D of my neck would see, like, oh, is it, like, the actual bones? Do I have bone spurs?
Mm-hmm.
They could, like, rule that out much more quickly. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely see, like, there's plenty of use cases there.
Yes, and they're hope that technology is being installed all over the place, but it's very expensive. So by allowing other businesses that don't have a cone beam to kind of rent the cone beam for a bit will just help grow the adoption and care coverage. Essentially, like more people will have access to this because of this software. But they are thinking about using Square appointments. Like, so if a practice has a cone beam and they want to sign up for Beam Reader's Airbnb type product, where they are thinking maybe they can also sign up for like a Square appointments account and manage those appointments. Like if someone's referring a patient to your practice, you can put that into the Square because it's not really so it doesn't make sense to put them into your patient management system. Yeah. So you put them in maybe like something like Square, and then facilitate all the communication over SMS. Because if, in my experience with Airbnb, at least, you book the place, you send the initial message to the property owner, but when you check in, they're switching to SMS right away or iMessage. No one wants to log back in. So the same thing we think will happen with the dental stuff.
Yeah.
Like SMS, or the patient does not know the practice that they're going to get this cone beam scan.
Right.
The more friction you can avoid, the better. So just send a text message to directly to the patient from your landline, and you'll cover that communication gap immediately.
Yeah. So one thing I want to kind of circle back to is that issues around like the liability. And then I'm curious on like the Airbnb type component to this. Is that in part to maximize utilization of the cone beam? Because like from what I would understand, like they're probably not cheap. So like you still want to like recoup the cost of it and maximize the use of it in order to like, make it worthwhile to have. So like, is this like in part to make sure that like people can find out where these things are and like get these scans done? And then also like, like to touch on like the shifting of the liability there.
Yeah. So there's actually two parts to the answer to that. So yes, the cone beam device is very expensive, and the dentist will acquire a machine, and they don't always use it because of that potential, because of the liability risk. They have to pay for the report. So to provide the most amount of care, the best care, if you have this equipment, you have to incur a cost as the provider. So the Airbnb model will help, hopefully at scale, help to lower that cost because you're recouping some of that. But the other thing that Beam Reader is doing, that it will be doing that's pretty innovative, is that they will allow the provider to offer the patient the option of paying directly for it. So
I see.
You'll go in, they'll say, look, we took a cone beam scan of you, but to ensure that there's nothing wrong, we recommend that you get it reviewed by a radiologist. If you want to do that, then they'll slide a Square terminal in front of you, the patient sticks her credit card in, and then the appropriate charges and fees get distributed. Everyone wins in that scenario.
So like shifting the patient in this instance is like paying for this directly. That kind of like shifts the liability. That's like, no, it's like it's their scan that they're paying for rather than like something that like the dentist, does and orders and runs through insurance.
Yes.
That kind of helps in like sort of shifting the liability that it's now on the patient to sort of like follow up with a radiologist or others.
Yes.
I see. Well, I'd love to see it, Square terminal device, just, put it right in there. I know we have plenty of workflows to make that a little bit more seamless. But yeah, that's really interesting that like that you can just through like one simple change in like the ordering of things or like who's paying for it can make that like far more viable. Because one thing I know that we had talked about before doing the podcast here is like the actual like impact that this particular technology can have for people because of like what it can see that you normally couldn't. I don't know if you want to sort of speak to that a little bit more.
Yes, I asked, I think recently, what percentage of scans come like on a day-to-day basis when a scan comes in? How often do you see something dangerous? And the staff said every day, multiple times a day. People are just getting their scans sent in, and there's like cancer or something else terrible. But it's really wild to think that only a small percentage of the scans get sent in for this kind of review.
Mm-hmm.
That's really scary. So if anything that we can do to make it easier on all the parties involved to be like, this is a good thing to do, you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for. And it has really huge implications for child development too, like the airway. Now we've seen a couple of examples where you'll see a child, it's like bags under their eyes, they're lethargic, poor grades. They go get a scan. You can see like the airways obstructed. So there are devices that you can give to the child to help aid in the development of their face, improve the airway. And after these things are administered, 6 weeks to 3 months later, very noticeable change in the child's appearance and behavior.
And all just from being able to like have like a more detailed view of the whole passageway from using this 3D scan.
Yes. And I used to really I've been scanned twice. And what I was able to see about myself was really eye-opening. So Asian people, I guess, are naturally like have smaller airways, but my airways are exceptionally narrow at 72 millimeters. So.
And what would be like sort of a normal to just give us an understanding of like the difference between like 72 millimeters?
Like double that.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. So I used to I remember one year I put on my Christmas list, be able to run a mile. So I thought it was all kinds of fitness things, but really it's obstructed up here. Like the oxygen can't come in to begin with.
Yeah. Wow. That's something I just wouldn't even really think about.
Yeah. And it's only possible because we have good tools now to back up someone's educated guesses.
Yeah. It has me wanting to like go get one because I've been diagnosed with mild sleep apnea. And I'm sure that like it at least helped me like rule out, like, do I have any kind of actual obstruction in here? Is there something that like can be done about that? I'm sure something like that would be super helpful for that.
Tremendously helpful because it's like it adds up. The longer you are apneic, the more damage to your body.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I've learned over time, it feels silly to say this because like, of course sleep is important, but it's when you don't have good sleep that you start to learn like how really, really important, because it kind of just like affects every other component of your life. And like, that's why like, you talk about like these children who are like having, obstructed airways, and it's just causing like a perpetual issue. And like, they're at like the most critical stage of development, that to have an obstruction is just so much more dire.
Yeah. And as a parent, I've reflected upon the times where we thought that there was just bad behavior, but it turns out the body is signaling. So for example, bedwetting, night terrors, those are all signs that the child's body is giving to you, that it's not getting enough air. So it's trying to wake up the child and get more air. I've heard from a lot of parents like, they just can't stop wetting the bed, or they're frustrated that for some reason their child is not, developed like all the other kids. I don't know. I can't grow up. It has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
You got to look at the airway.
So, weird segue, but I do want to kind of like circle back to some of the stuff that we talked about earlier with, because you mentioned about LLMs, and I do recall we had sort of touched on some of the ways that you sort of evolved your product over time, because, as we know that like SMS has become more regulated. And so being able to like go and get an account, I mean, I think some of us has had this with like the various like API messaging companies. Like you have to go through a little bit more of a process, but then also you've kind of innovated on ways to help mitigate certain types of issues to enable your users to use your product in the way that they expect it to. So I don't know if you want to like, first let's talk about like the regulation piece. Like how has that sort of changed things for your business, and how have you sort of reacted to it?
Yeah. So during the around the start of the pandemic, there was the formation of this entity called the campaign registry. And if you wanted to send SMS traffic from your software, you have to register the phone number with this organization, and then also specify the message payload. So kind of give them a sample of what it is that you're sending, and then they approve it. And once they approve it, you can start sending messages. But if you don't do that, you can still send, but you'll be charged a higher fee. I believe some point in time next year, they'll finally block it. Like if it's unregistered SMS traffic, it'll get blocked completely. And it really seems like the what they consider spam traffic feels more restrictive now. And so despite that, real businesses have real needs that they need the software for. So we started to notice that for one customer that uses it as like an alert system, the first person on the pool of numbers gets alerted, everyone else gets blocked. So that was causing a lot of frustration, since these are moments of importance for the business, and they can't afford to have these messages not be delivered. So that was the first time we ever used an LLM for anything. It was to rewrite the message. So it's given this recipient, this is their full name, rewrite this message and then send it to them. Like, so the business, they compose the alert message however they want, and then the LLM will rewrite that for each recipient. And we cycle through 3 different providers for that. So to try to maximize, because even if you change the temperature, sometimes you'll still get back the exact same message, and then that'll get blocked. So it goes 1, 2, 3, like Anthropic, OpenAI, Llama, and then just cycle through the numbers that way.
I see. And so, like, in your case of like the alerting thing, it might be like, say, I'm going to give a contrived example because I'm not going to sort of like mention what the specific case was, but like say that we had like an alert that like a service went down and you want to like message all the engineers who are like on call. Previously, you'd be like, oh, it's just going to get to the first on the list. And that one goes through, the rest of them are blocked. This would actually try to like sort of rewrite the message to make it more bespoke to each person on the list, so that these look like a series of individual SMS, not one massive one.
Correct.
Yeah. That's like, it's a very interesting way of like circumventing that, because like, it's like, obviously there's a need here, but at the same time, I know that in the last year, I think that we've all gotten lots of SMS from, political campaigns or from, other organizations. And so it's interesting sort of see like how you can help a business be able to use this for like a specific use case, and not for something malicious, like sending like a weird, spam text to a bunch of random people.
Yes, exactly. And the other interesting use case where along the same lines was that we had one customer who would send out really long messages, like up to 1,200 characters.
Wow.
And you can't send that large of a message over SMS reliably, because the carrier will break that up, and then they'll come in out of order. So they'll compose it. Then we ask the LLM to like break it down into bullet points, and then it can construct more sensible breaks in the long message than the carrier can. So that has both increased their throughput and like, if the message makes sense or not. So that was pretty neat that it can do that.
Yeah. And so one of the other things I want to just touch on, just for the sake of having people understand like how to go about building, for basically to help inspire those in the Square developer community. What did you first build Operator on, like in terms of like, backend languages, front end stuff, and how has that sort of evolved over time?
Oh, yes. So the very first version ever of the system was written with in Elixir.
Oh, wow.
Using Phoenix, because it had really strong WebSocket support. So that was like 2018, I think. And we had a mobile app that also connected. Since the Apple push notifications weren't guaranteed, we also applied WebSocket usage there. But then Elixir and Erlang and the Beam, they're kind of exotic technologies to me even to this day. So when I needed to rewrite the whole system, I did that in Ruby with Rails, because that's like the fastest way to get it up. So it's a web hook heavy system. So that's how the carriers communicate with us.
Mm-hmm.
So, thousands of webhook calls an hour. And so despite that, the system is still really small. It's like on a pretty small instance at Amazon. We store every webhook message that comes in and process that on a background queue. Because the luxury of SMS is that the receiver doesn't know when the message is coming. So it's not like WhatsApp where you give them, like the little dots that someone's typing like that. That's kind of unnecessary for business messaging.
Yeah.
They just know that the message is coming. So that buys us a little bit of time. So it's a Rails app that uses Sidekick behind the scenes. So small Rails app, but the Sidekick machine is kind of large.
Awesome. And, are there any other components? Like, so it's just staying with like a Rails app. Are you using anything for like any kind of like front end components of this?
In the newest or the latest version of Operator, it's a Rails. We just upgraded to Rails 8.
Mm-hmm.
Uses a lot of Tailwind, but it tries to be as vanilla Rails as possible though, because should something go wrong, like I want to be able to just picture in my head where the problem could be. Because messaging is like, I played a lot of hockey growing up, and there's this saying in hockey: if you're a defenseman and you play a good game, no one says anything, like no praise or anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you play a bad game, everyone brings you up, right? So the messaging service is kind of the same way. On a day-to-day basis, it's quiet. It's just message traffic, no support tickets. But when there's a delay or the customer knows that someone's texting them but they're not receiving it, then it gets crazy real fast. So the system is designed or I implement it in a way where I can like quickly diagnose or try to quickly diagnose where the problem could be. So storing the webhooks in the database for like 30 days, I can always replay things.
Right. Well, I think like you have a really, I can't speak even more to like how much like your approach to that aligns in terms of like that. As long as like you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, like everything should be quiet. But as soon as things go wrong, like, things are going wild. And I know like from a design perspective, within Square, the whole ideology was like to get out of the way of people running their business. Like the point of sale and all these things should not be like hindering things. They should just be kind of like folding into the background. They should be seamless because business owners just want to run their business and like, showcase what it is that they're trying to sell or what it is that they're trying to offer. And having stuff that like gets in the way of that is not helping them, it's hindering them. So like it should be saving time and be reliable. And I'm sure like with SMS, like that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to save them time and be reliable.
Exactly. And I think a big influence on how like this perspective on how to build it came from was actually visiting the customer on site. So if you go into a dental office and poke your head over the counter, they're not using Studio Display and MacBook Pros. They have like Square monitors back there.
Mm-hmm.
So these are people on older machines that they don't really care about real-time refresh, but they know if they come back, if they switch the focus to your browser and they refresh the page, they better come back up.
Yeah.
That's the bar. No. You cannot fail at that part. So we try to ensure that every single time.
Totally agree on that. I mean, the amount of times that like, we end up looking at like a redesign of a web page and we just go, oh my gosh, this looks so amazing on like this giant 4K ultra wide. And then you realize like, yeah, the JavaScript payload on that is like way too large and it takes forever to reload when you're on this like tiny little machine that is like on a very unreliable Wi-Fi connection. Like that's not saving somebody time.
Not on. The other thing that really influenced the decision to go with Rails is the Rails console.
Mm-hmm.
Like whenever something seems off, I can just SSH in and connect and start looking at the data that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a really helpful tool for me. And I think that's why I don't choose other tools. Like, if they don't have that ability, I can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a power to convention over configuration. I think even as a developer, as I've evolved over time, I used to be really into, building something with Express and using React, and I love the customization of it. And as time has gone on, I'm like, I really wish there was a little bit more convention here.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone kind of develops their own conventions, and it saves you a lot of time in your decision making because it gets you closer to solving the actual problem of like, you're building a business, you're building a service, like that's what you want to do. And convention gets you there much more quickly.
Yes, for sure. And also the other hard learning was customers don't really care about your stack.
Yeah. No, they don't.
When I first graduated university, I worked at Real Networks, the makers of Real Player.
Mm-hmm.
And my boss there was this C++ master. And he was really into like generics and C++ templates. So that was kind of my worldview. Like everything has to go through the C++ pipeline. Like otherwise, you're not a real programmer. But when you're talking to a business owner, any mention of that kind of stuff, right over their head, right?
Yeah.
They don't care. They just want it to work. And so I just try to pick the thing that is the most solid that gets me there. And
yeah, I could only imagine going to a Square seller and be like, hey, do you want us to build this with like a serverless technology stack that has like edge functions? And I'm sure they just be like, I need it to work. Like, I just want to take a payment and make a sale. Like, I don't care how it works.
Yeah, exactly. And especially with Square merchants, they have the Square on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
So they always say, can I use it on my phone? Like, they don't want to have additional hardware or anything. Like it needs to meet them where they work primarily.
No, 100%. I mean, like, I think I've regularly had when talking to members in our developer community or people who are wanting to participate in our hackathons, and like, they're building out like all these like web dashboards and other things. And, most of the time I'm trying to encourage them, like, understand that like the Square seller spends most of their time sitting in the point of sale or sitting in the Square dashboard. That's how they're like running a good chunk of their business. And so you don't want to be trying to pull them out of this. You want to find a way to like be injecting or hooking into this to complement their workflow, not pull them out of it.
And it's also really funny with the younger workforce. Maybe this is not okay to say, but in talking to the owner, they talk about some of the friction that they have with their staff. Like they're willing to do certain operations. I think having a mobile app for operator is a big win because the staff is already on their phone doing whatever it is that they're doing. If they can do their job from their phone, like that's one less battle you have to fight. That's not a job.
Yeah. Well, there's something also I think sometimes interesting about like, so I've talked about this with like people on my team, and this isn't necessarily with phones, but I feel like there's times when working from home and having multiple monitors can like suddenly be very distracting. Whereas like if I pull my laptop out, I have single view, I'm single focus on a task. Mobile devices actually really lend well to this. Like you can only really be in one app at a time. And so like when you're in that app, you're focused into like what you're working on there. Granted, I know like we all switch between apps. I mean, maybe not, but I know I switch between apps all the time on my phone. But at least when you're in there, you're focused and you're working on this particular thing. So like I do think that there's a power to that, to allow them to sort of like work in a constrained environment that keeps them focused.
100%. And recently, I mean, maybe the last like 6 weeks, I've discovered a super mode of that. I installed Linux on an old MacBook Pro, an M1 MacBook Pro, and it's like my favorite development environment now because there's nothing else on there. It's just VS Code and the kiddie terminal, and that's it.
Yeah.
But you get the nice hardware feel. I think that was always a big barrier. I didn't want to use like a ThinkPad with its weird trackpad and things like that. But
yeah, I've done that. I've done that old on a Linux build, and I thought it was going to be great for me, and I ended up just quickly reverting back to my MacBook. So I think like there's definitely a power to like having like the good hardware component, but then the simplicity of like, hey, all I have here is like all my development tools. There's nothing here to distract me.
And then the dev containers that were introduced in Rails 7.2. That once I learned about that, I was like, I can't imagine doing things without this.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I see that we're coming up on our time here, so I'm going to say that that's probably it for today. But I want to give a big thanks to Binh for joining us. I just so interesting every time I've chatted with you to learn more about SMS, how landline SMS can work. If you could just like let us know, where can people go to learn more about Operator or follow up?
Yes. So Operator is, like we mentioned before, it's kind of like white labeled, and it hasn't been, you can't sign up for Operator yet, but that will change in 2025 as we add sales staff to go out and evangelize some of these developments with the rest of the world. But I'm online at Binh on Twitter and Instagram, just BINH. And then in 2025, you can go to operatoroapp.com to sign up to start.
All right. Well, I think people should definitely go and check this out. For all of those listening, if you've got a project with Square, we'd love to hear about it. Please reach out to us on Discord or on X at SquareDev. And don't forget to subscribe and check out developer.squareup.com for more. Keep building and catch you next time.